this week's Shabbat Shalom episode. I'm Dr. Femi Overson, and of course, Shabbat Shalom. This week we're skipping over Revelation and the foundation, going on to speak about it next week. We're dedicating this week to Pesach, Passover. One is facts Passover, number one. Number two topic will be the Passover story. Three, Moses. Number four, the 10 plague. Number five, the question, historical accuracy. Number six, the Passover tradition. Number seven, Seder. Number eight, correlation between the Jew Passover versus the Christian Passover. Shabbat Shalom. Passover, or Pesach in Hebrew, is one of the Jewish religion most scarred and widely observed holidays. In Jewish Passover, commemorating the story of the Israelites' departure from ancient Egypt, which appears in the Hebrew Bibles of Exodus, the Book of Numbers, Deuteronomy, and of course, among many other texts. Jews observe this week-long festival with a number of important rituals, including a traditional Passover meal known as Seder, the removal of leavened products from their homes, the substitution of matzah for bread, and retelling the story of Exodus tales. When is Passover? Passover in 2020 is from April 8, 2020 to sundown Thursday, April 16. The date of Passover changes each year because the date is set not by the Gregorian calendar, but by the lunar-based Hebrew calendar. It always occurs during the Hebrew month of Nisan. Christians' Passover does have a correlation with the Hebrew Jewish Passover. Many historians have recorded that the Jewish execution of Yeshua took place during Passover. Many have theorized scholars that Jesus must have been born during Passover time. The Passover story is a very important one. According to the Bible and the Hebrew Bible, the Jewish settlement in the ancient Egypt first occurs when when Joseph, the son of Patriarch Jacob and founder of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, moved his family there during a severe famine in their homeland, of course, which was called Canaan. For many years, the Israelites lived in disharmony in the province of Goshen. As their population grew and they were thriving, the Egyptians see this and saw it as a threat. After the death of Joseph and his brother, the story goes particularly somewhat like this. A pharaoh orders enslavement of all Jews and systematically drowns all the firstborns of Jews in the Nile River. Moses play a particular foreshadowing. One of these doomed infants is rescued by the Pharaoh daughter, given the name Moshe, meaning the one who was pulled out and adopted into the Egyptian royal family. When he reaches adulthood, Moshe becomes aware of his true identity and Egyptians' brutal treatment of his fellow Hebrews. He kills an Egyptian slave master and escapes to the Sinai Peninsula, where he lives almost humbly as a shepherd for 40 years. One day, however, Moshe received a command from God to return to Egypt to free his kin, his bondage, his family. According to the Hebrew Bible, along with his brother Aaron, Moses approaches the reigning Pharaoh, who is unnamed in most biblical version of the story. Several times he approached to explain that the Hebrew God has requested a 3-day leave from the people for the people, so that they may celebrate the feast in the wilderness. Moses has a correlation with the 10 plagues. When the Pharaoh refuses, God unleashed 10 plagues onto the Egyptians, including turning the Nile River into the red blood, diseased flocks, boils of hailstone, 3 days of darkness, culminating in the slaying of every firstborn son by avenging an angel. The Israelites, however, marked the door frames of their homes with lamb's blood, so that the angel of the death will recognize and pass over each door. Jewish households were protected by that. Terrified of further punishment, the Egyptians convinced their ruler to release Israelites, and Moses quickly leads them out of Egypt. The Pharaoh changes his mind, however, and sends his soldiers right after to retrieve those former slaves. As the Egyptian army approaches the fleeing Jews at the edge of the Red Sea, a miracle occurs. God causes the sea to part ways, allowing Moshe, his followers, to cross safely, and then closes the passage and drowns all Egyptians according to the Hebrew Bible. The Jews, now numbering in hundreds of thousands, and then trekked to Sinai Desert for 40 years. Tribulation of years through finally reaching the ancestral home in Canaan, later known as Israel. The question of historical accuracy in the history of the Jewish Passover has always been talked about by scholars. Just remember, history is always told from the first person, not necessarily to the second person as accuracy. Accuracy of centuries, scholars have been debating the detailed historical merits of events commercially in this Passover holiday. Despite the numerous attempts, historians and archaeologists have failed to corroborate the tale of the Jews' enslavement in the mass of exodus from Egypt. Although the ancient Egyptians kept a thorough record, no mention is made of Israelite. Wonder why? The community within their midst of any calamities resembling the 10 plagues. I wonder why. There's also no evidence of a large encampment in the Sinai Peninsula, the fabled sites of the Jews wandering of any of sudden fluctuation in Israel. Archaeologists' record that will indicate the departure and the return of a large population. A handful of scholars, including the first century great name Jewish historian Josephus, have suggest a link between the Israelites and the Hyksos and the mysterious Semitic people, possible from the Canaan, who controlled the Lower Egypt of that time for more than 100 years before the explosion during the explosion of during the 16th century BC. Most of the modern academic, however, have dismissed this theory due to the chronological of conflicts and lack of similarity between the two cultures. Passover tradition is one of the most important Passover rituals for observant Jews in the removal of all leavened food products known as shamats from their home before the holiday begins, and also abstraining from all throughout the duration of the holiday. Instead of the bread, the religious Jews eat type of flat bread called matzo. According to traditions, this is because the Hebrew flatbread Egypt, when it's left, let's try to left Egypt, it was in the haste. This was much easier to carry, and it didn't have time for it to rise. Perhaps because matzo was also lighter, to carry, as I say. Throughout the desert, the bread was eaten. And then the meal Seder, it was one or two, for 2 nights, the family and friends would gather for a religious feast known as Seder, for Jewish holiday. During the meal, the story of the Exodus from Egypt is read aloud from one special text called the Haggadah, Hebrew telling and rituals corresponding to various aspects of narrative are performed. For example, the vegetables are dipped into salt water and representing the tears shed with Jews during the time as slaves, and bitter herbs usually are put in Hordashi symbolism, and unpleasant years of bondage by eating it. A Seder plate at the center of the table contains a Passover food with particular significance to the Exodus story, including the matzo of bitter herbs, a lamb of shank bone, and a mixture of fruit, nuts, and wine known as korozet or chorizet, which represent the mortar of Jews used while bonding the brigs as slaves in Egypt. Other typical menu items include matzo kukel, a pandan made from matzo and apples and porch fish patties called gefilet fish, and chicken soup or matzo balls. Children play an important role in Seder and expected to take part in many of the custom. At one point during this meal, the youngest child will present recite four questions, which they might ask distinguish questions such as special. What do you the special nights from other nights? What is different from this night in the household of young people? They would particularly enjoy themselves and hunt for acrophremen, a piece of matzah that is hidden early in the evening, and they will look fine and look around, fine, like a egg hunt back in America, and look and find such a thing. And so it's important that the history is always told from the people that actually live it, not the first person. So I wish you a happy Passover and a happy Pesach.